This video is about Social Security worries, and I believe this concerns everyone here in America. And so I used to hear about this when I was younger about Social Security, but it really wasn't that important to me because of being young. But when you start to get to an age where you start to think, man, that could be me someday, and you start to get in your age of your middle aged years, you start to think about these things more seriously. So I saw an article which I thought was pretty interesting, and it was about Republican plans to raise retirement age falls heavily on the poor. And this article is by Esme E. DePrez and Margaret Newkirk, and it was submitted October 13, 2015, around 5 o'clock. So this is talking about the life expectancy stagnant as the affluent live longer, and for Virginia man, eating is optional after a life of labor. So there's a lot of issues that come out when people start to get to an age where they're considered senior or getting close to senior citizen, and there's a lot of things that people will do in preparation for that time when they're young is to try to save up a sizable amount of money or work to put into retirement so you can retire with ease. But over the years, we've seen that isn't always easy. And I started noticing this earlier on when I was younger, when I saw my grandfather. He couldn't afford to pay his mortgage for his house. So eventually his home went under foreclosure. And by him losing his wife and being by himself, he was lonely, and he started to have a lot of health problems, and he wound up, I believe, going into a nursing facility, which that in and of itself can be pretty costly. And Social Security alone won't cover all of the cost of those type of long-term stay situations. So this article that I was talking about or referring to, it says Republican presidential candidates' rationale for raising the retirement age that we're all living longer holds true for those with multiple diplomas, homes in safe neighborhoods, and a plan for the golden age leisure. But that isn't the case for everybody's situation, of course. In other words, for the wealthy. For the poorer, however, research shows that as incomes have stagnated, so have life expectancies. Candidates Chris Christie, Ben Carson, Jeb Bush, Mark Rubio, and all support raising the age of retirement. Democrats tend to oppose the premise that Social Security is in crisis and that working longer is a fair way to fix it. Lifting the age from 67 and the idea pushed for years to bolster Social Security would affect Americans in dramatically different ways. So, depending on their wealth, forcing the poor who die younger to work longer threatens to make a lengthy retirement a perk reserved only for the prosperous. If we increase the working age in order to mend Social Security, people will be punished in places where life expectancy is very low, said Ali Mokdad, a health professor at University of Washington in Seattle. This is another policy where the rich will benefit more than the poor. Nowhere is the disparity more apparent than in Virginia, which has the widest life expectancy gap of the U.S. state, according to the data collected by Mokdad and the colleagues. So, in the wealthy Fairfax County, just outside Washington, the average woman can expect to celebrate her 84th birthday, and men their 81st birthday. travel 130 miles to 210 kilometers south of Petersburg, a poor majority black city near Richmond. Those figures plummeted by 11 years for women and 14 for men. The rich, the poor, death divide is the widest in Virginia. So they have a graph that they show on this article. And this article, by the way, is Bloomberg. And, you know, if you start looking at these issues, so now I'm going to skip over from this Bloomberg article. And I'm seeing a whole host of issues saying that raising the retirement age a sneaky way, blah, 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 from the Atlantic. Senate GOP leaders challenge wording the referendum to raise the retirement. Republicans against retirement. That was in August 16, 2015. Jeb Bush raised the retirement age. MSNBC. Here's why raising the retirement age for Social Security is blankety blankety blank. Okay, probably not good. And it goes on and on. So there's a whole host of issues about retirement. So you also have another one in MSN under money talking about retirement. And this one is by the Sean Williams. And it says, in terms of retirement income, no program is more vital to seniors' financial well-being than Social Security. For more than 75 years, Social Security income has provided financial floors for countless seniors, with the center on budget and policy priorities, estimating that elderly poverty rates in America are just 8.5% because of the Social Security income, as opposed to 40.5% without it. Data of Social Security Administration backs the reliance on benefits. According to SSA, or Social Security Administration, 61% of all beneficiaries are counting on their Social Security benefits to supply at least half of their monthly income. This is true. So I'm kind of ad-libbing in here. So I know from people who are at an age where they rely on Social Security, it's like their life, their income. So here you're seeing a Social Security trust fund, which this is the fear that there won't be any money for people who are poor on average in the year of 2034. And some people don't really expect to live to 80 or past 80, or at least to, past the age of 81 and 84. Most people are hopeful if they can get to 60 and in like maybe their mid 60s to late 60s. So, depending on your healthcare situation, how you fare, does things that are in your family that you can't control, like hereditary, like maybe illnesses and whatnot, you can never say that, oh, I'm going to live to be 70 years old. And so some of these issues are really really serious issues that are attacks on people who are poor. In another way, an elderly. So here, this figure was particularly high. 71% of unmarried elderly individuals, even pre-retirees, which believe they will be less reliant on Social Security than the current generation of beneficiaries, would likely struggle to make ends meet without Social Security income. While Social Security has been a financial blessing for many retired workers, their spouses, and their families, it's a major cause of concern. Projections of Social Security Board of Trustees suggest that the program could begin paying out more in benefits than it's bringing in via payroll taxes, interest through the taxation of benefits by 2020, ultimately accumulating in the program, exhausting its more than $2.8 trillion in spare cash by 2034. So it doesn't really sound very good. A majority of working Americans have this all wrong, is what this person is saying. And there's a clip. If you're among the many retirees relying on Social Security, the idea of the program exhausting spare cash probably sounds terrifying, just like what I was saying. Transamerica's Center for Retirement Studies, which regularly surveys Americans to get a feel for their retirement preparedness and knowledge, found earlier this year 77% of workers are concerned that Social Security will not be there for them when they do retire. Yet, truly terrifying fact here is that Social Security spare cash is expected to be depleted in less than 2 decades. It's a majority of working Americans are just plain wrong about the Social Security. So one on the near surefire guarantees that Social Security is that it will be there when baby boomers, Generation X, millennials, Generation Z retire. In other words, Social Security won't be going bankrupt anytime soon ever, is what he's saying. So the reason Social Security will be able to provide benefits to Americans' retired workforce, the disabled, survivors of deceased workers, lies with the payroll tax. Even if more than 2.8 trillion current and spare cash is depleted, as the trustees report has predicted, payroll tax revenue, 12.4% tax, that's often split down the middle between you and your employer, which is paid in full by self-employed, will continue to be levied and collected on American workforce. As long as Americans keep working, the program will continue to generate a revenue. Social Security can be, in theory, continue forever as a budget-neutral program that pays out benefits based on what is collected via payroll tax revenue and a taxation of benefits. So it goes on and on and on. So you're going to see like clips of people who are in nursing homes, and from my experience, I noticed that the elderly, people who have disabilities, and there is things that you can never control. Sometimes people will get in accidents where maybe they don't have the use of their body as they did when they were younger or when they were in a healthier state. And so they can no longer work. So they need to collect disability and then maybe some Social Security, depending on the age and what they put into it during the time that they worked. So the fear is that as time progresses, that there won't be any Social Security to be had. So like what I was reading, they were saying that, there's spare cash on hand. But I don't believe that everybody really believes this. So the true worry of working Americans, I'm going on to read this, should be that their future Social Security benefits may be reduced from its current trajectory. The Board of Trustees estimates that when the spare cash is depleted across the board, benefits cuts 21% may be needed to sustain the program through 2090. This would put 3 in 5 retirees who count on Social Security for a majority of their monthly income in a very precarious position. Precarious position, pretty much you're in trouble. This estimate serves as a wake-up call for working Americans. Both have a working budget, retirement budget ready, and have alternative channels for income for retirement. So our kids will probably see 20, 30 and past that, and then our grandkids, and that's when they use the term precarious position that most of those retirees would be in by that decade. And sounds like it could be a problematic situation eventually coming down the road. So they go on to have all these different formulas of how to make goals and to prepare yourself to have retirement. Now, I always was taught that when you work, you put into retirement and what you work for. And I've seen people, for example, I'll take, people that I've personally seen where they retire. And I always wondered about this. They said, I'm retired. But they go back to work and work a little bit, or they work like the whole time. And they can only work so many days out of a month or out of a year or so. If I'm not mistaken, some people might know more about this than I do. or have witnessed this. I've seen people say they work a couple of months or maybe a couple of days out of a month, and then they have to wait, and then they call them back, and you have to be on like a call list. It depends on what your job entails. And if like for the job I'm referring to, and I won't get into it because I don't want to reveal too much, but there are people who have retired and they are working because they need to work the extra hours to make ends meet, or otherwise it's social security is not enough. I heard another woman that I knew in the past, she said her social security check was not enough to cover her mortgage. And I've heard that a lot from different older people who their kids have grown up, moved out of the house, or they, their husband or their wife died or whatever, or maybe they do have a someone, but a lot of times I find that they're single elderly adults where they've outlived their spouse, or either they just, the spouse died or whatever, or they divorced and they've just been by themselves. So I don't know if any of you had ever remembered, there was this episode in Good Times. It reminds me when I'm thinking of all of this, that where there was this elderly lady and she lived across the hall and she was eating dog food because she couldn't afford to eat anything else. And there was a time when I was a kid that older people would go and buy dog food as if they had, or cat food as if they had a pet. But they actually, in reality, they didn't have a pet. They were actually eating that food because it was cheaper than trying to spend their little money on regular food, people food, because they just couldn't afford it. And I remember this is a huge problem. It probably still happens, I would imagine. And now it seems like it's getting worse, because now I'm hearing people that say, oh, I'm retired, but they're still coming to work. And some of these people, I've seen them, they work until they've got health issues. They can barely walk. I've seen this, and they'll come in, and I'm thinking to myself, when I get that age, I don't want to be doing this kind of stuff. I don't want to be coming in. You can barely walk. It's just terrible. And, and they really, really are trying to work. And then when you get to an age where you're a grandparent, you're trying to provide for your grandkids or try to help your children. So it's sad, very sad.